Hello and welcome to the Single Malt Review. Just Tim here today. Dave's up in the North Island doing some sort of thing. I don't actually know what he's doing. He'll be able to tell you when he gets back next weekend, I suspect. But just me in the meantime. I'll have to keep the production working, as they say, and bite the bullet on this one and drink by myself. Never mind. What are we having a look at today? It's something that's probably a little bit overdue. It's Glenfiddich, 12 years old. A whisky of which you are, or at least should be, highly familiar. I certainly am, although I haven't bought a bottle in goodness knows how long. It's just a whisky that normally kind of turns up, I suppose. Or certainly a whisky that exists wherever you turn up, because it's in just about every bar on the face of the earth, you'd have to say. One of the whiskies that enjoys the, you'd have to call it an almost unrivaled ubiquity within the market. It really doesn't have any notable competitors in terms of things with just the sheer penetration that Glenfiddich does. There is an enormous brand engine behind Glenfiddich, and it does its job rather well. But never mind. It's not really, I suppose, a whisky pitched at me. It's very old school in terms of its presentation, and I'm not talking about the rather lovely green bottle. I'm talking about the fact that it is coloured, chill filtered, and 40%. It's very, very old school in that regard, whereas most other sort of premium, craft oriented, or at least craft and premium pitched products have gone up to at least 43, and at least offering a cask strength or chill filtered version. But no, Glenfiddich is staying absolutely resolute in their old school nature, and I suppose they have the luxury of doing that because they're just about the most successful whisky brand out there. Certainly the world's best-selling malt whisky, as they will tell you at the drop of a hat. But why don't we have a wee look at what's actually in the bottle? Because I've tasted it already, as I like to do, and I was not exactly taken aback, but I was surprised at maybe not the complexity of what I found, but the intensity I found to be quite pleasing. So we'll get there. First, a couple of choice tidbits about the distillery itself, because there's a few important facts when it comes to Glenfiddich. It is the biggest malt whisky distillery in Scotland, probably the world, although I didn't look up that particular statistic. But the interesting part is just how much bigger it is. It is really, really vastly, hugely enormous. When you think about a close, maybe competitor for brand ubiquity and availability, it's probably the Glenlivet, you'd have to say. And to put it in perspective, the Glenlivet's litres per annum of pure alcohol is 10 million, which is, it's a lot, but Glenfiddich is 14 million. So they're a full third larger than this, probably their closest competitor in terms of visible, available whiskies. And to put that in even more perspective, Edredour, a very, very small distillery, their production per year, 95,000. So the gap there is truly, truly huge in terms of what these distilleries kick out and the scale of these distilleries. To keep this sort of volcano of production going, Glenfiddich has a full 31 stills. At least I think that's what my note says. Yes, it does. 31 stills. And the warehouse space they must need for this infinity number of casks must just be extra dimensional. Their warehouse tour must be like the end of the Space Odyssey in there. It must be truly, truly phenomenal. I would be fascinated to see the system they use to get at these particular casks. I mean, goodness knows, if you wanted to taste one in the middle of the stack, that must be an undertaking of some description. Maybe they have robots. They've probably got some sort of robots. Who knows? Scottish cask lifting Highland robots. Anyway, Speyside. Very, very quintessentially Speyside. And probably quite famously Speyside as well. It's one of the whiskies that really, really typifies the region. I would comment on the colour, and I'd say, well, that looks like it's probably bourbon dominant, which it is. But being coloured, I can't even infer that, so we won't bother. It suggests that it's been in bourbon and sherry casks, and I believe that, fine, but I think the sherry portion is going to be really very, very slight in this 12-year-old. Really very slight, I think. The flavours you get from it are very, very bourbon-centric. So, cat's having rebellion in the corner there. Never mind, it escalates. Oh, no, he's got the eyeball now, he's fine. So, we won't bother with the colour. On the nose, it pretty much says, or rather does, what it says on the tin, almost to a T. Apples, pears, vanilla, and a little richness to go along with it. And you can smell that exactly. And I would have said there's a significant malt component in that as well, I should say. And a significant honey component as well. Quite a light honey, clover honey, if you get that particular variety in your region. And to me also quite a floral component. Not a really sort of pungent Highland floral, but a gentle gorsebush, I think windbush they call those in the UK. A little bit of honeysuckle as well on the nose. Tiny, tiny bit of citrus blossom as well, maybe lemon blossom, but that may be getting a little too far out there. And on the palate, really a follow-through of the nose. It strikes a good balance between rich and refreshing. It almost succeeds in doing both at the same time, which is really quite an achievement. Although, if there's one whisky where they have, stock available to blend the perfect 12-year-old, it's going to be Glenfiddich. But whoever their blender is, and they'll be perfectly available online as to who that was. I didn't actually look that up, I forgot, but never mind. I think they do really quite a good job of maintaining the style, because though I don't check in with this one too often, whenever I do, it's always instantly reminiscent as, oh yeah, here it is again, Glenfiddich 12, and that's a good thing really when you're trying to maintain a non-vintage product, you could say. There's a tiny bit of spiciness there, a little bit of nutmeg, and just a tiny bit of ripe fruitiness, a tiny little bit of riper, redder apples, which maybe gives away just that little hint of sherry matured whiskey which has gone in there, but I still would say it's sub 5%, in my unprofessional opinion. But it is really actually kind of pleasing. I think a lot of people sort of fob off Glenfiddich 12-year-old as being maybe airy-fairy. They call it insipid, not interesting, boring. I think if you drank it for a long time, if I had 5 of these, it would get pretty samey because it doesn't have a great breadth of character to it. It, smells and tastes of those things which I described, and that'll describe as well on the back of the bottle, and that's kind of where it stays. It doesn't really move from that. The finish is not short, it's about a medium finish, but nothing really develops hugely. So it's simplistic, but it is quite pleasing, and it's not like some people say, it's not insipid. There is a significant richness here. It's not a thin whiskey, and it's not a particularly light-bodied whiskey. I think that's another mistake that people make with the Glenfiddich 12. A light-bodied whiskey, that would be something like the 12-year-old Glen Ord that we tried a couple of episodes back, that particular single cask from Hunter Lang. That's a light-bodied whiskey. This really is quite rich as far as whiskies go. Still, you'd say before dinner, still in the aperitif style, but that's many space sides, really. This one I'd liken more to... I'd liken the body and the weight of that more to a Cragganmore, actually. Cragganmore or a Linkwood or something like that. Not heavy, not full-bodied, certainly, but well within the medium spectrum. And it's very, very good. It's very Moorish. It's easy to drink. It's certainly inoffensive, but I could probably give it more praise than that. It's not just inoffensive, it's easygoing. It doesn't demand anything of the drinker, and therein, I think, lies its supreme popularity. It's a whiskey for everybody. Really, people like me, the whiskey sort of connoisseurs, aficionados, geeks, whatever. Geeks is probably a bit more apt. We're the only people that Glenfiddich 12-year-old is not for. It's everybody else that it's being pitched at, and that's probably why it does so well. It is a whiskey that anybody can approach, anybody can enjoy, because it's not harsh, it's not weird like a Springbank or something like that. It's not peculiar in that it's peated. It offers flavours that almost everyone, you don't have to be a super taster to know what apples, pears, vanilla and sort of malt taste like. So I think its simplicity and its easygoing nature really, really go in its favour in that regard, and in its sort of position as the everyday, every man's whiskey. I mean, a lot of people consider this to be the epitome of single malt. People that would normally drink, bourbon and coke mixes or lots of blended whiskey or something like that. When they think single malt, they think, oh well, that'll be a Glenfiddich 12 then, cream of the crop, whatever. And that's a huge, huge, huge market. We just don't, have much not much interaction with them because they're different sort of people from different sectors of the world. But yeah, I can appreciate this for what it is and what it does. And so the score I will give this one is an 89. It's really quite an accomplished thing, so long as you look past your prejudices about it. As long as you don't expect a very cerebral whiskey or a very out there whiskey or a whiskey providing something new and different, it really is quite well put together. More than quite well put together, really. I think it's masterfully blended together. I really haven't had a whiskey in quite some time that has achieved this refreshing and rich at the same time kind of a thing, which provides an excellent feedback loop of wanting another glass once you've had one. So I'm really enjoying the whiskey. I mean, I probably won't end up buying another bottle for another 5 years because I'll be able to catch up with it. Any whiskey cupboard in the world will probably have one rattling around, or I'll end up with one after a meal, or goodness knows. But yeah, no, good and surprisingly good stuff, I think. But if you stick around for the next episode, which should be up shortly, so actually, don't wait by the computer because it normally takes me a day or two to get around to producing it. The next episode, I'm going to look at a different Glenfarclas, and that's going to be, I think, quite a different story, I think, because Glenfarclas, although the 12 is ubiquitous, the other expressions are certainly not, and they're very, very, I think, different. So stick around for that one, and thank you for sticking around for this. This has been the Single Malt Review. Slanger. Dave will be back very shortly. I'm sure anyone pining after his angle on things, and we won't waste any time getting back into the malts box. Thank you very much.